Recently, Spain, France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Lithuania have jointly submitted a proposal to the European Commission, seeking to roll out stringent trade measures against China by copying the U.S. Section 301 tariff mechanism. The move has sparked widespread speculation over a potential China-EU trade war. Certain European politicians have stoked public opinion by citing the €360 billion trade deficit with China. They claim cheap Chinese goods are flooding local markets and crippling Europe's domestic manufacturing, pushing the misleading narrative that China suffers from overcapacity and dumps products into Europe. Such arguments do not hold up to scrutiny. The truth of China-EU trade tells a different story. While China books the trade surplus on paper, most of the profits end up in European pockets. Nearly half of bilateral trade consists of intermediate goods. European firms source cost-effective semi-finished products from China, process them into high-value finished goods for global sales, yet these value-added gains are excluded from customs deficit calculations. French automaker Renault stands as a prime example. Supported by Chinese supply chains, the carmaker cut its new EV development cycle by 1 year and halved related R&D costs, with its roughly €2,000 electric vehicles becoming popular across European markets. The EU has long maintained a solid surplus in trade and services, earning tens of billions of US dollars annually from intellectual property royalties alone. The EU could easily narrow its goods trade deficit if it lifts export restrictions on high-end products such as lithography machines to China. China's rising exports to Europe are driven by the bloc's own demand for energy transition and vehicle electrification, substantially boosting Europe's green industrial upgrade. Europe's struggling manufacturing stems from internal flaws rather than Chinese competition. Misguided geopolitical decisions triggered an energy crisis, pushing industrial power and gas costs far above US levels and forcing many energy-intensive factories to slash output or shut down. Cumbersome EU administrative procedures and excessive regulation drag down industrial development. An average industrial project takes 1 to 3 years for approval, with some waiting over 6 years. Coupled with insufficient homegrown R&D investment, Europe is falling behind China and the US in technological innovation. Strong opposition to protectionism persists within the bloc. Germany, the EU's largest economy, refused to back the proposal. Spain actively courts Chinese investment, while the Netherlands remains skeptical of steep tariff hikes, making bloc-wide implementation all but impossible. Europe once championed free trade and repeatedly condemned America's Section 301 probes as unilateral hegemony. When the US imposed tariffs on European goods in the past, French and other EU leaders openly blasted the measures as unfair and unlawful. Now, Brussels seeks to replicate the US tariff playbook out of anxiety over fading industrial competitiveness. As Washington's trade war against China has proven, tariff costs are ultimately passed on to domestic consumers and local businesses, never fixing underlying industrial weaknesses. China and the EU feature highly complementary industries and deeply intertwined economic interests, leaving the bloc economically unable to sustain a full-scale trade conflict with China. Protectionism only wastes the benefits brought by globalization. China consistently advocates pragmatic cooperation yet rejects unfair unilateral trade barriers. Beijing will take legitimate countermeasures against any tariff policies that harm Chinese enterprises. It is hoped the EU will abandon protectionist impulses, return to negotiation, and deliver win-win outcomes through cooperation.